silence, something stirs. Ancient, hungry, and waiting. This isn't just another night in the Philippines. This is where promises turn into blood, where love becomes a weapon, and where the line between the living and the damned disappears. Welcome to Charlotte Dixon, the channel that drags you deep into the heart of Filipino horror. Tonight, you will witness the pulse beneath her ribs, a story of a mother's fury, a vampire's curse, and a battle where hair becomes steel, and sacrifice is the only way home. If you think you're ready, turn off the lights, lock your doors. Tonight, let the darkness dive into the pulse beneath her ribs, a haunting Filipino vampire horror story of blood, betrayal, and the unbreakable bond between family. In a small town shrouded in darkness, a fierce battle unfolds between a determined mother, deadly creatures, and the curse that threatens them all. Her hair becomes her weapon, her sacrifice fuels the fight, and under a moonless sky, vengeance takes its final breath. This is not just a story of survival, it's a story of love turned into a blade. Mary Jane's hair was the kind that could stop people in their tracks. Long, thick, black as midnight, so dark it seemed to swallow the light around it. She always kept it tied back, a simple bun or braid that looked ordinary at first glance. But those who had seen it loose knew better. It reached past her hips, a waterfall of darkness that seemed almost alive. She never explained why she kept it so long. Neighbors would joke she could sell it for a fortune and buy herself a car. Others whispered she might donate it to make wigs. But she never agreed to cut it, no matter how much they teased. Only trims, never a real cut. There were rumors, of course. In a barangay where gossip was currency, no one's habits escaped scrutiny. Some claimed her late grandmother had told her never to cut it, that it was her shield. Others said she was too vain to part with it, that she liked the attention. But those who knew Mary Jane well, really well, suspected there was something deeper. Something about the way she would flinch when someone tried to touch it. Something about how she always slept with it braided and tucked under her pillow, as if afraid it might be taken from her while she dreamed. Ana had once asked to touch it. Mary Jane had laughed nervously, let her brush her fingers over the glossy strands. But when Ana's hand lingered, she quickly pulled away. "It's hard to explain," Mary Jane said. "But one day when you're in danger, you'll understand. Maybe it will save you." Ana had laughed it off, teasing that maybe she'd be the one saving Mary Jane instead. But the coffee seller's face hadn't lost its seriousness, even as she smiled. Meanwhile, in another corner of the barangay, three men gathered under the dim light of a flickering street lamp. Vince, Joseph, and Chong, the surviving husbands of Princess, Joy, and Marie. They weren't just mourning, they were plotting. Vince, Marie's husband, leaned in close. "You really saw him?" he asked, his voice low but tense, and Chong nodded slowly. "From a man hiding in the shadows to a priest. Then I realized he's no priest. He's a monster. I saw how Princess was killed. Not by any spirit, by a male vampire." Joseph's jaw clenched. Joy's husband, me, saw it too. "And I think that's the same creature who took Marie." "Then we all saw the same thing," Vince said grimly. "It wasn't an accident. It wasn't fate. It was him." The three men knew the gossip about Ana's husband, Perrin. They'd heard the whispers about his pale skin, the way his eyes sometimes gleamed red, the odd hours he kept. And they had convinced themselves he was the one who had taken their wives. Revenge for their gossip, vengeance for Natalia's shame. "He's a threat to the whole town," Vince spat. "We can't let him keep walking free." Joseph nodded. "Killing him is the only way," and Chong looked between them. "Then we need a plan, and we need it soon." That same day, Perrin was at work, bent over a desk in the small maintenance room of the parish building where he'd been doing odd jobs. The hum of the old air conditioner filled the silence, until it shifted. It wasn't just cold air anymore. It was a breeze that carried something heavy with it, something that whispered. His head lifted slowly. The voice was faint, almost drowned by the AC's whir, but it was there, spoke his name. He stepped back, every sense sharpening. This was not the first time he'd felt an unseen presence reaching for him through something as mundane as an appliance. But this time it felt targeted. It felt deliberate. "Perrin, you okay?" One of his coworkers asked from the doorway. He blinked, forcing a calm smile. "Yeah, just thought I heard something." But his chest was tight. The bite mark on Ana's skin, the one he'd left, burned faintly in his mind. Something was coming, and he knew exactly whose husbands were desperate enough to try. That night, Mary Jane walked home later than usual, her long braids swinging down her back like a heavy rope. She stopped twice on the road, sensing movement behind her, but saw no one. In her small home, she let her hair down for the first time that day. The thick strands fell around her like a curtain, brushing the floor. She sat in front of the mirror and began combing, each stroke slow, deliberate. But halfway through, she stopped. The reflection behind her was wrong. Too many shadows. And in those shadows, the faint outline of 3 men. Her lips tightened. She reached into her drawer, pulling out a small pouch of salt. "Not tonight," she whispered. Across town, Vince, Joseph, and Enchong were whispering in the dark, crouched behind the abandoned basketball court. "We hit him tomorrow," Vince said. "While he's alone. We can't fail," Joseph added. "If we do, we're next." And Chong stared at the ground. "We already are." The wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest scent of coffee and something far older. Somewhere, in a house lit by a single bulb, Ana woke up from a dream she couldn't remember, clutching her stomach. The baby had kicked harder than ever before, and from the corner of her room, where the fan sat still, she could have sworn she saw a strand of hair, long, black, impossibly thick, sliding across the floor. Perrin said yes, but the word didn't feel steady in his mouth. Agreement tasted like metal, necessary, but sharp. He nodded to the coworker in the parish maintenance room, tucked the wrench back into its drawer, and tried to look normal. Inside, every sense was flaring. Something had chosen a path toward him. Something organized. Something that quoted dates. He sat up on the cot in the break room and spoke into the stale air, voice low, not sure who he was talking to. God. The air that carried whispers. The quiet thing that had guarded Ana since the lies began. "Whoever you are, whoever wants to kill me, you don't know who you're killing," he said. Not a threat, just a fact he wished someone would hear. He closed his eyes and saw Ana's chest, where he had fed once and promised never again until the child was born. He saw Natalia's hands, still shaky but steadier now. He saw Mary Jane's hair, black rope, a river, a secret, and for a blink, the strands looked like lines on a map drawing him home. Across the barangay, Mary Jane set a bowl of mango on her tiny table and felt a flutter in her chest that wasn't hunger. The room dimmed around the edges. Something cold pressed at the windows, not entering, only measuring. She put her spoon down and breathed through the fear. "Whoever you are," she whispered toward the door, "you won't get him. If he's in danger, I'll meet it first." She didn't know when she had made that oath. Somewhere between boiling water and braiding her hair. But once it formed, it locked into place like a knot you can't undo without cutting the cord. Days moved. Plans hardened. The 3 men, Vince, Joseph, and Chong, met in a lot big enough to hold the sound of their anger. The dust their remembered games of basketball and summer fairs. Now it swallowed boot scuffs and the grunt of punches landing on pads. Joseph took front, hands up, voice firm. "First part was prep. Second part is training. Weapons last," he said. Vince scoffed. "Weapons first makes more sense. It's a vampire." And Chong, wiping sweat from his neck, chimed in, "Yeah, stake, fire, done." Joseph shook his head. "A cornered thing doesn't wait for your perfect swing. He'll move, and if you miss, you're dead. Learn to move, learn to breathe. Then we talk steel." They trained until the light got thin and the shadows lengthened into doubt. They missed, they fell, they cursed, and they got up. And Chong's lungs learned a new shape. He stopped hiding from mirrors. The gym saw him at dawn, Rice left his plate more often. A month passed and his shirt sat different on his shoulders. "You're looking good, Chong," Vince teased one evening, half to keep spirits up, half because it was true. "I'm different," and Chong said simply, eyes not leaving the focus mitts. Some nights the lot felt watched. Joseph ignored it and called for footwork. Slide, set, strike, reset. He made them spar blindfolded for a round at a time. "You won't always see what hits you," he said. "You'll feel it. Trust what you feel." When they failed, he didn't mock. He reset the drill. "Your wives didn't get justice. Train like justice depends on how fast you turn your hips." By the time July cracked its knuckles, they had a routine and a target date. Joseph drew a circle on a paper calendar, his thumb smudging the ink. "August 1st. We go then," he said. "And before that, we collect holy water. We'll need more than a bottle." Vince raised a brow. "You put a tax on a schedule? We're not thugs," Joseph said. "We're going to war with something old. We do it clean." On July 28, 2025, they stood under the fan in the parish office as the priest angled his glasses down his nose. "MJHO, what are you doing here?" he asked, tone midway between pastoral and tired. "Father, if you allow it," Joseph said, respectful, controlled. "We'd like a gallon of holy water." The priest blinked. "A gallon? Are you baptizing a whale?" Vince cleared his throat. "There's a monster in our area, Father. He killed our wives. We're going to deal with him before anyone else dies." "Is that so?" the priest said softly. He didn't write anything. He only watched their faces, all the way to the bottom where grief lives and grief's cousin, vengeance, grows teeth. "Father," Joseph tried again. "We're not joking. We've trained. We're ready. We just need this." The priest stood and walked to the font. The room felt smaller when he returned with a heavy plastic container. He didn't hand it over yet. "Holy water isn't a weapon you swing like a bat," he said. "It's a prayer you carry. If your heart is wrong, it will weigh you down instead of lifting you." "Our hearts are right," Vince said, too fast. The priest looked at his hands. "Right hearts do not rush to spill blood." "Blood was already spilled," and Chong said, voice low. Silence gathered like a cloud. Finally, the priest sighed and placed the container on the counter but kept a palm on its lid. "I will bless the water. I will bless you too, whether you think you want it or not." He made the sign of the cross, Latin cutting the air into careful pieces. "Dominus vobiscum," he murmured, and when they didn't answer he simply said, "May you see the line between justice and vengeance before you cross it." Outside, the three men carried the weight between them, as if sharing the gallon might also share guilt. The plastic sloshed. The sound was oddly like a heartbeat. Back in the parish maintenance room, Perrin woke at the same moment the blessing ended. He hadn't been sleeping heavy. Vampirin sleep walked a thin border, but the breath that filled his lungs felt borrowed, as if someone had pushed it into him just to make sure he stayed. He sat up hard. "Okay," he said to the empty room. "I hear you." He didn't know if he was speaking to the priest's prayer, to the haunted air, or to the old thing that had wrapped pink light around Ana's safety and turned rumors into a warning sign for monsters. He only knew he wouldn't win this alone. Pride was a bad strategy. So he stood, pocketed his phone, and went to find the one person in the barrio who braided protection into every step. Mary Jane opened the door before he knocked. She always did that, made visitors feel predictable. Her hair was bound in a thick coil that looked like it could anchor a ship. "You felt it too," she said. He nodded. "A date, August 1st. Dates are for humans who need permission," she said dryly. "But it matters. They believe in it, so it will make them brave." "They trained," he said. "They're not playing." Her eyes softened. "Grief makes new soldiers." "I'm not their enemy," Perrin said, "but I am the shape their anger fits." "You're also a husband," Mary Jane said, "and a father." She tilted her chin toward his chest. "And a man who has to come home." He swallowed. "I can't lose control. Not with Ana and the baby." "You won't," she said, like it was already decided. Not if you borrow what I've been saving. He almost smiled. Your secret. She turned and untwined her hair. It fell like night falling after a red sky. He felt its pull, old like river current, like lullabies that keep storms at bay. She pinched 3 strands free and braided them with salt and a thread from the shawl Aina wore the night she bled hope into his mouth. Wear this around your wrist, she said, tying the small braid. It won't stop a blade. It will stop a lie. What does that mean? When people swing from lies, they miss, she said simply. This makes missing louder, he exhaled. And if they don't miss, then the water they carry will decide who's drowning, she said. And if the water chooses, you won't have to. Night deepened like ink poured slow. Joseph stood in his room with a notebook. He'd mapped alleys, cataloged habits, timed the parish gates. He wrote August 1 to 8 p.m. and underlined it twice. We go in clean, he texted the chat. No one dies but the monster. Vince replied with a thumbs up. And Chong sent a prayer hands emoji and then another one, as if doubling it might double protection. Across the street, Aina woke again to a kick that wasn't pain but wasn't comfort either. It was a knock. She placed her palm there and the knocking stopped. We wait, she whispered to the child. We go nowhere near the door. Natalia came to the bedroom doorway and leaned on the frame, a mug of ginger tea steaming in her hand. You can feel them moving pieces around, she said, half question, half acknowledgement. Aina nodded. It smells like rain before it actually rains. Natalia set the mug down and touched the shawl edge tucked under Aina's pillow. Lola used to say, when men train to kill, the house trains to hold. What does that mean? It means I locked all the windows, Natalia said. She tried to smile and didn't force it when it didn't come. July 31st slid over the roofs like a shadow and lodged in the corners. Money changed hands with a whisper, like people were paying the wind to keep a secret. Okay, I'll give you the money. You can kill him, put our area in peace, the neighbor said, and for a second the 3 men, Vince, Joseph, and Chong, felt tall enough to touch heaven. Their smiles were thin and bright. The plastic gallon of holy water the priest had blessed sat cool between Vince's feet like a promise. They agreed Vince would keep it safe until the date. Time has edges when men draw them on calendars. July 29th, 2025. As the month thinned to its last days, Mary Jane's dreams thickened. Hunger wasn't for food. It was a pull in her ribs, an ache under her scalp where the long black braid grew from prayer and stubbornness. Each time she fell asleep, a scene returned. The parish priest fighting 3 shadows. No faces, just weight and intent. At the end, the priest gasped, then turned transparent, slipping backward into the wall like a soul shocked out of place. She woke with her heart sprinting in the dark. The ceiling seemed lower. She touched her hair and felt it hum. A soft electric warning. Someone wants to turn a father into a ghost, she whispered. Fear crawled thin as threads under the door. And someone else wants to turn my children into orphans. Across the neighborhood, the 3 men felt none of that. They felt ready. They took 2 days to rest, which meant sharpening their stubbornness, rehearsing their story. We're not killers. We're widowers. August 1st, 2025 night. They met in the broken court where they had trained. Joseph's voice was cut from concrete. Guys, this is the night. Remember what you've learned. No arguments in the field. We finish it. Vince nodded, jaw hard. And Chong smacked his palms together, too loud in the quiet. Joseph split the tasks. Vince, go first, stash the water where we planned. And Chong, with me. We knock. At the rectory, a light burned friendly as a kitchen lamp. The smell of rice and sautéed garlic drifted through the screens. The priest stood, said grace over a plate he wouldn't touch, because the knock came 3 times like a habit. His wife, soft voice from the back, called, "Honey, are you okay there?" "I'll check," he answered, but a draft pressed against the door with him. It carried a sour heat, an anger that wasn't his. He opened. Joseph and Nchong stood on the mat, shoulders squared, breath white in a warm night. They looked at him as if a verdict had already been read. "What do you need?" the priest asked. "Your life, Father," Enchong said. "That's what we need. We know you killed them." The priest stared. "Is that so?" he said, not moving. Then the air changed. For a beat, Joseph saw his own words hanging in front of his face like a banner. "Your life," and underneath, smaller letters written in someone else's hand. "To trade for what we lost." Something laughed, soft and wrong, from the garden. The priest's expression didn't break. "Before you enter a house to take something, make sure you know what it is," he said. "Are you here for my life, or for your story to make sense? Don't you know why I did it?" A voice said. Not the priests. All three men turned. The voice had come from the holy water Vince was carrying up the path, sloshing as he jogged to catch up. He froze. Joseph held up a hand. Vince stopped, breath hard. "Who said that?" And Chong whispered. The voice came again, this time from the shadows under the mango tree, and from the gutter, and from the phone in Vince's pocket, and from the old electric fan on the rectory porch that wasn't even plugged in. "Don't you know why I did it?" It was the exact sentence Princess had posted when she pinned her first lie. It wore her tone. It wasn't her. The priest stepped back into the doorway so the rectangle of light framed him like a painting. "There it is," he said. "The thing you fed. Rumor made into a mouth. Show yourself," Joseph said, lifting the water. Mary Jane's voice cut across the walkway before the air could answer. "Don't invite it." She came out of the dark like a boundary the night had decided to honor. Her braid lay heavy across one shoulder. In her free hand, a small cloth pouch of salt. She angled herself between the men and the doorway without posturing, the way a mother silently steps in front of a scooter to keep a child from getting clipped. "You again," Vince snapped. "Stay out of this. You brought a prayer to a knife fight," she said, nodding at the water. "At least let the prayer speak before your fists do." The fan on the porch shivered. The voice turned sweet. "I'm your justice," it crooned. "I say what you can't. I do what you won't. Don't you know why I did it?" The priest raised a palm. "Because they believed you," he said to the air. "And belief is a ladder placed against the wrong wall." "Father," Joseph said. "With respect." Mary Jane opened the salt pouch and drew a quick circle on the tiles with the edge of her shoe, sprinkling a line like a seamstress mending a rip. "Step inside," she told the priest. He did. The moment his heel crossed the ring, the porch fan fell still. The voice hissed, not with breath but like pages tearing. From the street, footsteps approached. Perrin. He kept his hands where everyone could see them. The small hair and salt braid Mary Jane had tied around his wrist dark against his skin. He didn't look like a monster. He looked tired. He looked like a man choosing every motion on purpose. "If it wants a priest," he said quietly, "it will take any man in a collar. If it wants a monster, it will paint fangs on whoever stands still long enough." "Shut up," Vince said, but it lacked heat. He was staring at the holy water jug. The plastic bulged slightly, as if something inside were trying to breathe. "Let the water choose," the priest said gently. "Pour it on me if you must." "No," Mary Jane said. "Pour it there." She pointed to the fan. Joseph hesitated, then tipped the jug's mouth toward the metal blades. Water arced. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the stream hit an invisible skin and spread like rain on glass. It hung in the air, beating into a shape, a face without features, wet and wanting, before collapsing onto the tiles with a hiss that smelled like something rotting under sugar. The voice shrieked, static through a phone, wind through a cracked mouth, then pulled back so fast the leaves rattled. Vince stumbled, and Chong grabbed his elbow without looking. "Holy water doesn't burn people," Mary Jane said. "It burns lies that learned how to talk." They were quiet long enough to hear a child laughing far away, a dog kicking in its sleep, the soft drop of water falling from the fan's cage to the floor. 1, 2, 3. Joseph's shoulders lowered a fraction. He breathed like a man setting down a crate he'd carried too long. "If we're wrong," he started. "We are," the priest said, not unkindly. Perrin didn't step closer. "I didn't kill your wives," he said. "I couldn't protect them either. But the thing that fed on what they said, on what everyone shared, took the shape of your grief and wore it. Then why did we all see?" Vince couldn't finish the sentence. "Because it wanted you to," Mary Jane said. "Because it knew if it pointed at one of us, we'd finish its work." Silence balanced on the porch rail like a bird deciding whether to stay. And Chong looked at the jug, now light in his hands. "What do we do with this?" "Return it," the priest said. "And yourselves." Joseph nodded. It wasn't surrender. It was sanity coming back like the tide. He turned to go, then turned back. "If it wasn't you," he said to Perrin. No accusation left, only the ache that makes men ask questions in soft voices. "What was it?" Perrin glanced at Aina in his mind and felt the steady beat under his palm from last night's quiet. "A mouth," he said. "The kind we all carry when we forget words can be knives." They left without handcuffs, without apologies that would have sounded like excuses. The road took them the long way home. Somewhere on it, a firefly drifted across Vince's path and wasn't pink at all. It was just a small light doing its job. Mary Jane wiped the salt ring with her heel and felt the porch relax. She looked at the priest. "Lock your fan in a cabinet," she said with a half smile. He laughed once, surprised by the shape of it. "I will." Perrin touched the braid at his wrist. "Thank you," he told her. "You're not done," she said. "Something that eats talk doesn't starve in one night." He nodded. "I need to get home. The house knows how to hold," she said. He didn't ask again what that meant. He liked that the answer would be waiting for him where Aina slept and Natalia paced and a baby knocked from the inside just to say, "I'm here." He walked into August, and August opened like a door that wanted to be kind. The rope had barely fallen from Joseph's hand when the night itself seemed to tighten. The air pressed close, damp and metallic, like a bell jar being lowered over the cemetery clearing. Even the rain paused in thin threads, listening. The priest, framed by the weak spill of light from the rectory path, didn't flinch at the three faces staring back at him with the single expression grief eventually carves into men. A need that calls itself justice. His voice came steady, each word measured as if spoken across a confessional grill. "You can do that," he said, eyes on Joseph. "But on one condition. Let my last moments mean something. A battle. You against me, two or all three as you wish. If I lose, you take what you came for. If I win." He didn't raise his voice, but the end of the sentence left a cold on their skin. "You will follow your wives into the next life." It was not bravado. It was a ledger being read, and Chong's mouth twisted first. "Arrogant," he muttered. The word a spark coughed into dry grass. He took a step that said now, but Joseph's palm opened briefly. "Wait." Vince let out a short laugh that didn't belong to the night. "He doesn't look like much," he said. "He's half my size." Joseph didn't look away from the priest. A long beat passed between them like a drawn bowstring. Then Joseph nodded, slow. "We accept," he said, "but prepare for your death. We don't plan to lose." The priest tipped his head once, almost like a blessing thrown back at them. He turned in, spoke soft to the darkness of his house. Aina would later compare the tone to a father laying his hand on a fevered child, and came back out with his cassock unbuttoned at the throat, the fabric falling like a shadow trained to listen. They walked to the ground no one in the Barangi uses after dusk. It was not a field as much as a piece of earth that had forgotten how to welcome footsteps. Crooked markers leaning like tired teeth, a mausoleum door ajar, grass grown tall enough to hide a man's mistake. The old wooden cross at the edge had warped in the heat. Its tilt made it look like it was bowing or warning. Thunder rolled beyond the hills. Somewhere, a stray dog barked twice and then reconsidered. Vince crouched by a collapsed headstone and set the kit they had assembled with more determination than knowledge. Short blades with a dull gleam, a length of rope still damp from the open gallon in his tricycle, a cloth-wrapped stake, the handle taped for grip. The holy water's plastic bulged. as if the night were trying to inhale through it. "That him?" Vince asked, chin at the priest. "Missed the height requirement, father." His grin bent the wrong way. "Can he even fight?" "Don't be cocky," Joseph said. But he said it to the ground almost, like reminding the earth itself they had learned things with their bodies these last weeks. Then everything learned had to prove it could survive fear. The priest did not square off like a movie. He moved one foot, barely, angling his body so the rein hit one shoulder and slid off, freeing the other to turn. And Chong's patience snapped first. He charged, big frame, better footwork than a month ago, leading with a feint, then a low swing with the stake aimed blunt end at the ribs. The priest's hand found in Chong's forearm, not to stop it but to borrow it, a spiral that sent energy sideways. And Chong's weight tried to correct, and in that sliver the priest's palm landed on a point below the sternum. Not a strike but a heavy push to drop breath. And Chong stumbled back, the world fuzzing at the edges, eyes watering against the sudden vacuum in his lungs. Joseph filled the opening. He didn't overcommit, his biggest change since training began, and stepped in with a compact kick meant to unroot a leg. It landed. The priest's knee buckled, but the next beat belonged to him again. A forearm to Joseph's shoulder, not hard, but placed to pivot him off his line. Joseph's blade swiped cloth, and the sound it made, fabric tearing under metal, was louder than it should have been. Vince circled, rope sliding over his palm, angle hunting. The rain fattened, each drop a small, cold slap against skin. The ground turned treacherous. They shifted on Saul's and memory, and Chong sucked air like a man waking, lowered his center, and re-entered. The priest's brother emerged from the perimeter the way some shadows choose to be seen only when it matters. He didn't speak. He cut Vince's circle with a straight line and put a clean right hand on his jaw. Vince saw white in his head, bit down, drive still hot. He came up swinging the rope in a flat arc. It hissed when it clipped the brother's sleeve. The man's mouth tightened. Not pain, but respect for a thing that could mark you without warning. 2-on-1, Joseph snapped, and the field obeyed. He and Chong moved like a hinge, one high, one low, learned rhythm turning into something that, for 6 seconds, looked almost like partnership. The priest accepted each choice and refused each consequence, absorbing a graze at the forearm, turning a hook into a shoulder brush, letting a kick land but robbing it of its alphabet so the word of it never formed. His breath didn't show. Theirs did. Why stop him? Vince barked to Joseph between beats, meaning why let him breathe but saying why remember he's human. Because rage trips, Joseph hissed back, then didn't speak anymore because the priest's hand moved again, and words cost seconds. The rope came. The priest didn't back away. He let it bite his wrist. Steam lifted where blessed water met skin. His face did not change. He twisted his trapped hand and shortened the line with a jerk. Vince's body followed, a physics lesson taught with bruises. The mud took him without asking, and the thump his back made was the kind that convinces a man to choose differently next time. Rain came harder. A small river began at the highest corner of the ground and threaded through rebar and roots. Somewhere nearby, the plastic gallon gurgled like a throat that cannot clear, and Chong's cheeks flared red where the priest's counters had found him. Joseph's lip carried a thin, metallic smile no one wanted. Vince shook his head once and the world stuttered, then ret-racked. The priest stepped back one stride and, oddly, stilled. He looked at each of them as if checking a list. Then he said, mild as a teacher in a room full of boys trying to be men, "Vengeance is a blindfold you pretend is a helmet. It won't protect you. It only lets you run faster into whatever's in front of you." "We're not here for a sermon," Chong said, and the line wasn't new, but the way he said it, hoarse, breath-scraping, jaw set against a lesson he could feel, dragged something softer through the mud before tearing it again. He came. Joseph came with him, and this time they did not graze, they landed. Joseph's blade kissed the priest's forearm and left a line that water immediately filled. And Chong's shoulder collided and shook the man off his center. It would have turned into advantage if the priest hadn't used the angle of it to torque his hip and drop a kick low into Chong's middle. The big man's knees found the ground. Joseph learned what the back of a hand can do when it is trained to speak a different language. The copper at his tongue was answer enough. Vince stood into the gap. He didn't whip the rope now. He slid on the wet and caught the priest with the taped handle across the knuckles. A painful kindness. The brother flowed in to punish the attempt. Vince met him with a low, ugly tackle he would have been ashamed of in training and grateful for now. They rolled. Vince's shoulder screamed. The brother's breath left him in a sound like surprise. Vince found the edge of the stake with his palm and shoved it at cloth, not flesh. His own line he wouldn't cross even here, and the brother chose to accept that and retreat 2 steps. Not because he had to, but because a man decides what kind of night he has. Thunder stood closer. Lightning didn't bother to shout before it hit somewhere past the trees. The cross at the edge creaked, a hinge almost failing. The rain broke into sheets, and all 4 men were soon colored in the same pattern. Soaked, slick, faces raw with effort and rain. Then the field itself joined the fight. From the far side, where the mausoleum's open door watched like a tired eye, a wind pushed that didn't belong to the storm. It dragged the smell of old flowers and older paper. It bent the rain sideways and combed the grass flat and rose up under the holy water gallon so it thumped once against stone and settled again. The fan that wasn't there hummed. The voice the men had heard at the rectory, the one that loved to borrow other mouths, arrived without invitation. "You don't know why I did it?" It cooed, and Princess's pin-post tone rode on it like a rider on a stolen horse. The sound made each man look at a different past. The priest's eyes sharpened. They couldn't. The fight kept looping back on itself like a song with no chorus. Rush, clash, slip on wet grass, reset, breathe, and then rush again. No one wanted to surrender. No one would admit the night had teeth. 1 against 3. 1 fighting to keep a promise and breathe another dawn. 3 fighting for faces they could no longer touch, wives, children, a world before whispers grew claws. Vince feinted left and drove a kick square into the brother's back. The force folded him for an instant. He stumbled to one knee, mud splashing his palms. "If I were you, I'd give up," Vince hissed. "Vampire!" The brother pushed up, face pale, breath steadying through grit. "As long as I live, I fight," he said. "If your wives weren't permitted in this place, I would never have killed them." His voice wasn't pleading. It was iron put into a sentence. "That's still not a reason," Vince snapped and came again. The line broke into movement. Joseph slid to flank, and Chong charged on a wide arc, cutting angles. The brother pivoted to track them all, but Vince's earlier kick had left a slow burn along his spine. Every twist had a ghost of pain in it. He slipped, just for a moment, and then Chong crashed through, shoulder into ribs, taking him to the ground. "Cheater!" And Chong barked at Vince, not for helping, but for enjoying it. "This is it?" Vince shouted back, breath ragged, eyes wired with a fever that wasn't adrenaline anymore. He looked like a man riding a storm he thought he summoned. "Now!" They surged again. The brother rolled, took the worst of the impact in his forearms, and found his feet through sheer, stubborn geometry. He swayed, then settled. The rain dimmed to a mist. The cemetery watched without blinking. Time blurred. Strikes turned to shoves, turned to grappling on the slick earth. Boots scraped stone. Breath burned. The brother gave space and took it back, patience inside violence, but he was tiring. No one needed to say it. When the 3 finally jolted apart to catch 1 heartbeat of air, Vince didn't waste it. He sprinted to the tricycle crouched behind a listing wall and hauled up the heavy plastic container they'd stashed there. He had taken the holy water the priest gave them and, against Joseph's caution, steeped it with garlic, salt, and whatever else old men at the corner store swore would sap a monster's strength. The mix sloshed, sharp and sour even through the rain. "Vince," Joseph warned. Too late. Vince upended the mouth toward the brother and drove the stream into him like a fire hose. It hit chest, face, throat. He coughed, choked, staggered. The smell lifted and punched the wind. The brother dropped to a knee again, one hand on the ground like an animal trying to stop the earth moving under it. Heat flooded him, then cold. His skull rang like someone had smacked a tuning fork against his bones. His vision starred at the edges. "Feel that?" Vince shouted, triumph like a flare in a dry field. "Now lie down and be done." The brother didn't lie down, but he didn't lunge either. He pressed his palm flat into the mud and then stayed upright by asking everything in him to help. Joseph exhaled, long and hard. The plan had never included this, witch's soup poured from a blessed jug. The voice from the edges of the field, the one that borrowed other people's tones, had gone quiet at the first splash and stayed that way, like it was learning a new rule about the night. And Chong glanced at Joseph. "We end it now," he said, not gloating, not cruel, just worn, and wanting the unbearable to stop being the only thing happening. They turned to block the entrance to the clearing, the three of them instinctively forming a gate. Picture. Proof for a story they could live with later. "We cornered the monster and the town is safe now." The sentence fit too neatly. They barely heard the first shout. It wasn't loud. It was clean. Enough. They pivoted. A woman stood just outside their body's line, almost close enough to touch. They hadn't seen her arrive. No splash of footsteps. No rustle through grass. She wore the night like it knew her name. "Marijan," Joseph said automatically, then corrected himself because everyone knew what they meant when they said it wrong. "Mary Jane, what is a beautiful woman like you doing here?" he added, defaulting to a tone used to deflect and buy time. Mary Jane didn't answer that. She simply stepped into the clearing the way a sentence steps into a lie and refuses to move. And Chong's eyes flicked from her hair, bound, heavy, to the pouch of something in her hand. He made a stupid joke because fear does that. "Looks like we'll be able to taste her," he said. And even as he said it, he winced at himself. It wasn't the man he wanted to be. It was the night getting in his mouth. He and Vince reached out by reflex, boys in a schoolyard reaching to jostle a truth out of the way. Their hands didn't land. Something invisible but not unreal thumped their wrists together. Left to right to left, and held. They jerked back on instinct. Whatever held them held easy as a mother hand in a parking lot. They were not bound with rope. They were stuck to their own grasping. Mary Jane's braid loosened one finger's width. Nothing more. "This is not your door," she said. Joseph went still. He didn't touch her. He did not raise his weapon. He raised his eyes. "If you're here to stop us," he said, voice rough, "you're late. I'm here to stop what happens after," she said. "When you believe the wrong ending forever. Move," Vince growled, trying to wrench free, skin burning where his wrist met Chong's. "This is between men." Mary Jane's face didn't change. "Your wives would disagree," she said softly. The line landed harder than any strike tonight. Behind them, the brothers swayed but did not fall. The mix had done what it was meant to do. Weaken, scramble, sting. He blinked water and salt out of his eyes and saw, through the smear, Mary Jane's silhouette slide between the three and the doorway out. "Let him stand," she told the men. "If he can stand after what you poured, he's not the thing you think he is." Joseph's jaw flexed. "We saw. You saw what your grief wanted a face for," Mary Jane said. "It chose his." A long moment hung. The storm had moved farther off, a deeper drum now, as if the sky were tapping its fingers on the table, bored with humans trying to be gods. The holy water jug lay on its side, a last skein of garlic sour liquid trickling over stone, white in the dark. "Let go," Mary Jane told the air, not the men. Their wrists unlatched with a soft, sticky pop that wasn't sound so much as a feeling. Vince jerked back like he'd been shocked, eyes snapping to her hands to find nothing there. "You don't want our proof," he said. "You want us to walk away empty." "I want you to walk away living," she said. "So you have to look your children in the eye tomorrow." Joseph took a breath that tasted like old rain and new thunder. "If he didn't do it," he said, nodding toward the brother. "Then who did?" Mary Jane angled her head toward the far corner of the clearing where the darkness was thicker, like someone had spilled ink there and it refused to fade. "The same thing that spoke through your screens," she said. "The same mouth that likes to wear other mouths." Silence pressed its thumb to their throats. The brother wiped his face with his forearm and stood fully, the world tilting and then leveling obediently underneath him. "I didn't kill them," he said again. It wasn't begging. It wasn't bargaining. It was a tired man refusing to move a pillar inside himself no matter how hard the wind pulled. Joseph looked at the ground, then at the holy water, then at Mary Jane, then at the brother, and finally at Vince. And Chong watched him decide in real time. The tiny, unglamorous shift from rage is a plan to rage is a blindfold. And Chong felt the same shift, a small click in his chest, like a lock admitting a key it didn't know it wanted. "Then this isn't our enemy," Joseph said, hoarse. He lowered his weapon. His arm trembled, not from fear, from the weight falling off. Vince didn't lower his yet. His pride screamed. The rain had erased most tracks, but not the ones on his face. "We swallow this," he said. "And what, go home? Say we got it wrong? The barrio will laugh." "The barrio already laughed," Mary Jane said. "At you, at them, at us, because laughter costs less than listening. This is where it stops costing them and starts costing you again." No one spoke. A light wind ran its fingers over the cross at the edge. The voice from the perimeter, the one that had borrowed Princess's words to puppeteer the night, tried one more time, a thin thread through the grass. "Don't you know why I did it?" Mary Jane turned her head toward it. "Because we let you," she said. Then to Joseph, "And you don't have to anymore." The two foreign men came to the barangay with the confidence of wolves entering a pen of lambs. They had been drifting from place to place for weeks, always taking, never giving, moving on before their trail of lies caught up with them. And when they first saw Marijan, standing behind the counter of her small store, the warm glow of an oil lamp behind her, her impossibly long black hair cascading down like a living curtain, they knew they had found their next game. She welcomed them without suspicion, offering food, a place to rest, even a smile that seemed to open the doors of her home. The taller man, Victor, immediately began weaving a story about being a trader passing through, while the shorter one, Raul, pretended to be his cousin, offering to help her with chores. But their eyes were not on her kindness. They were on the polished wood cabinet in the corner, the small jewelry box tucked on a shelf, the envelope she had once slid into a drawer when she thought no one was watching. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Marijan had heard every whisper from the very first night. Her hair, sensitive to even the softest vibration, caught the faint murmurs of their plotting in the next room. When Victor said, "We'll take it all after a week," she heard. When Raul muttered, "If she refuses, we'll make her," she heard. She did not confront them. She did not warn them. Instead, she watched. She let them think she was growing fond of them. And every night, when they fell asleep, she sat in the dark, combing her hair slowly, feeling the strands grow heavier, sharper, hungrier. By the third night, the air around the house began to change. It was subtle at first, a coldness that seemed to seep in even when the windows were shut. The walls groaned as though something was shifting inside them. Candles flickered for no reason, their flames stretching unnaturally toward her hair whenever she passed. Victor began asking more about her late husband. "Did you love him?" he said one evening, his voice laced with mock tenderness. "Do you miss having a man in the house?" Raul snorted behind his cup, pretending not to listen. She smiled faintly, pouring them salabat. "Drink," she said. "It will keep you warm tonight." They drank, and at first it was only the ginger they tasted. But then Victor's throat tightened. Something coarse slid across his tongue. He gagged, pulling it free. A long black strand of hair, wet with tea. Raul laughed until he saw one curling out from his own cup, coiling around his spoon like a living snake. "What the hell?" Raul began, but the words froze on his lips as the lamps blew out all at once. The house plunged into a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the sound of the rain outside. For a moment, the men could hear nothing but the pounding of their own hearts. Then came the sound, a slow, deliberate dragging, like metal scraping against the wooden floor. From somewhere in the blackness, Marijan's voice rose, soft, but carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Do you know why I keep my hair long?" Victor tried to laugh, his voice trembling. "What kind of question is that? Open the door." She cut him off, her tone still calm. "Because it is the last thing my enemies ever see." The scraping sound grew louder, closer, until Victor swore he could feel the vibration of it against his shins. And then coldness wrapped around his ankle. He looked down just in time to see a strand of hair curling tightly, biting into his flesh like a constrictor. He kicked out, but the hair held, tightening with the sound of tendons straining. Bone cracked. He screamed, falling to the floor. Raoul ran for the window, smashing it open with his elbow. Lightning flashed, and in that split second he saw her. Marijan stood in the center of the room, her eyes glowing red like embers in the dark. Her hair no longer hung neatly behind her. It writhed in the air, dozens, no hundreds, of strands splitting apart like the legs of some monstrous spider. Each one was sharpened to a gleaming point, wet and glistening. "You thought you could take what's mine," she said, her voice low and almost tender. "You thought you could leave me with nothing." The hair moved. Victor barely had time to scream before 3 strands shot forward, piercing through his hands and pinning them to the floor. Another strand wrapped around his throat, lifting him into the air with the strength of a steel chain. His eyes bulged as he kicked helplessly, the hair slowly pulling him closer to her face. Raoul dove halfway out the window, but a strand coiled around his waist and yanked him back so hard his spine cracked against the sill. Before he could draw breath, the strands drove through his ribs, punching out the other side with wet, sucking sounds. Blood gushed hot across the floorboards. Victor's scream turned to a gargle as Marijan's hair forced its way into his mouth, down his throat, slicing as it went. His body convulsed, his heels drumming against the floor until, with a final shudder, he went still. Raoul's struggle slowed, his eyes rolling back as more strands threaded through him, lifting him like a marionette before dropping him in a limp heap beside his companion. Silence returned. The only sound was Marijan's slow breathing as her hair unwound from the corpses, slick and heavy. She did not glance at their faces. Instead, she walked to the window, watching the rain fall in silver sheets. Somewhere outside, Anna's laughter floated faintly through the night. Innocent, light, untouched by what had happened inside. Marijan closed her eyes, whispering, "For you, my child." By dawn, the bodies were gone. No blood stained the floor. The neighbors would later say the 2 foreigners must have left in the night without saying goodbye. But deep in her storage room, hidden in the shadows, hung 2 long braids of black hair. Entangled in each braid was a pale, lifeless face, mouths forever open in silent screams. And as Marijan combed her hair in the quiet of the morning, the braids swayed slightly, as though the faces within were still trying to breathe. Because in this house, in this barangay, the hair never forgave, and it never let go.